So at the time, I was in my mid-20s. I had a group of friends that I had known since college, and we would occasionally do trips together. Hiking trips, camping, stuff like that. We all lived in different cities by then, but we tried to get together a few times a year. So one of my friends, his name was Greg, he suggested we do a serious backpacking trip through a mountain range out west. Something more challenging than what we had done before. Multi-day, real backcountry stuff. There were 5 of us going. Me, Greg, a guy named Tyler, a girl named Mara, and this other guy named Daniel. Now, I had met Daniel a couple of times before through Greg. He was Greg's coworker. He seemed fine, honestly. He was pretty quiet and a little awkward, but he was into the outdoors, and Greg said he was a solid hiker. He had done trips like this before, and Greg trusted him, so I trusted Greg. None of us really knew Daniel well enough to have an opinion about him either way. He was just kind of there, you know. So we planned the trip for late September, which in hindsight was already pushing the season a little bit. We drove out west, got to the trailhead, and headed in. The first day was beautiful. Clear sky, perfect temperature, amazing scenery. We were all in good spirits, and Daniel seemed to loosen up a bit once we were out on the trail. He was actually pretty knowledgeable about the wilderness, pointing out animal tracks and edible plants and stuff like that. I remember thinking he was actually pretty cool once he relaxed. Day 2 also went well. We covered a lot of ground and set up camp near a ridgeline. The views were incredible. Everything felt really good, and we were all tired in that satisfying way you get after a hard day of hiking. Then on the morning of day 3, things started to shift. The weather changed overnight. We woke up to heavy gray clouds and dropping temperatures. Greg checked his weather app, and there was a storm system moving in faster than expected. We decided to push hard and try to make it to a lower trail junction before it hit. That was the plan. Move fast, get to lower elevation. But we did not make it in time. The storm came in hard. We are talking driving snow, near zero visibility, and temperatures that dropped fast. We got disoriented trying to find the trail in the whiteout conditions. Mara twisted her ankle badly on some hidden rocks under the snow. And then the worst thing happened. Tyler fell. There was a drop-off that none of us could see clearly in the storm. He did not fall far, maybe 10 or 12 feet, but he hit a rock ledge wrong. He was alive, but he had clearly broken his leg and possibly something else. He was in a lot of pain and could not move on his own. We got ourselves into a sheltered area between some large rocks and set up camp as best we could. Greg had an emergency satellite communicator, and he sent out a distress signal. We knew help was coming, we just did not know when. The storm was bad enough that any helicopter rescue was not going to happen that night. We settled in, rationed our food, and tried to stay warm. That first night was rough but manageable. Tyler was in bad shape but stable. Mara's ankle was swollen and tender, but she could move around some. We kept everyone as warm as possible and just tried to wait it out. On the second night of being stranded, Tyler got worse. His breathing had changed. He was in and out of consciousness. We did everything we could, but he passed away sometime in the early hours of that second night. It was devastating. I had known Tyler for almost 6 years. Losing him out there, in the cold, was just awful. We were all pretty wrecked by it. Here's where the story turns into something I still have trouble processing. The storm lasted another full day. We were now into our 3rd day of being stranded with very little food left. We were cold, exhausted, and grieving. At some point, Daniel got very quiet. Quieter than usual. I noticed it, but I was not thinking much of it. We were all deep in our own heads. Then at one point, Greg pulled me aside and told me in a low voice that he was worried about Daniel. He said that twice during the night he had noticed Daniel moving toward where we had placed Tyler's body, which was a few feet away from our shelter, covered in his sleeping bag. Greg said he had assumed it was nothing, that maybe Daniel was just checking on things or grieving in his own way. But he had seen it twice and something felt wrong about it. I did not want to believe it. I honestly thought Greg was just shaken up and reading into things. So I did not do much about it right away. But then later that evening, Mara came to me and said the same thing. Independently, she had noticed Daniel doing the same thing. Going over to Tyler's body and coming back. And she said when he came back the second time, he was chewing something. I felt physically sick. I want to be clear that none of us said anything directly to Daniel at that moment because we did not know for certain and we were genuinely scared of what might happen if we confronted him and were right. There were only 4 of us left and we were stranded in the wilderness. So we agreed that from that point on, we were not going to let Daniel out of our sight. Someone would always be awake. We were not going to sleep at the same time. The rescue came the following morning. A team reached us on foot and got us out. It was one of the greatest reliefs of my life. When we got back to safety and got checked out medically, Greg reported what we had seen to the search and rescue team and eventually to law enforcement. There was an investigation. Daniel denied everything at first, but when authorities examined the scene and Tyler's remains, the evidence was there. Daniel had done exactly what we feared. He admitted to it eventually, saying that he panicked, that he was convinced we were all going to starve, and that he had done it to survive. Here's the thing that I keep coming back to. We still had food. Not a lot, but we had some. And rescue came the very next morning. He was not actually in a survival situation that required that. He just went there on his own. Whether that says something about Daniel specifically, or whether there is something darker underneath that he had always carried around, I honestly do not know. The investigators did not find any prior incidents, but I have never been fully convinced that his explanation was the whole truth. Tyler's family was told what happened. That was a whole other layer of grief on top of grief. I have not gone backpacking since. I do not think I ever will again. And I think about Tyler a lot. Not how he died, but how he lived. He was one of the funniest people I have ever known and he did not deserve any of what happened to him. That is all I will say about that. So at the time of this story, I was working a job in a mid-sized city and I had only been there for about 6 months. I did not know a ton of people yet. My social circle was pretty small and I was still in that phase of just trying to get comfortable in a new place. One of my coworkers, a woman named Patricia, was one of the first real friends I made there. She was friendly, funny, easy to talk to. She had been at the company for a few years and kind of showed me the ropes when I started. Patricia had a wide circle of friends and she would often invite me to things. Happy hours, birthday dinners, that kind of stuff. It was through Patricia that I met this guy named Raymond. Raymond was one of those people who you meet and immediately think, wow, this person is really put together. He was probably in his late 40s, very polished in the way he spoke and dressed, had a really nice house in an older, well-kept neighborhood. He was warm without being over the top about it. He hosted dinners at his home fairly often, which everyone seemed to love. The first time I went, there were maybe 10 people there. Nice food, good wine, good conversation. Raymond was a genuinely excellent host. He cooked everything himself and seemed to take a lot of pride in it. Everyone spoke very highly of him. Over the next several months, I went to a couple more of these dinners. Each time, same thing. Good atmosphere, good food, and Raymond in the kitchen being the gracious host. I liked him. I had no reason not to. Then one evening, Patricia invited me to what she called a smaller dinner. Just 4 people. Her, me, Raymond, and one other person I did not know well. It was on a Saturday. I remember it was raining that night. Raymond had made some kind of braised meat stew. He did not specify what it was exactly and I did not ask. That was not unusual for him. He liked the drama of making people guess. The table would always try to figure it out and he would just smile. The stew was honestly delicious. Dark, rich, slow-cooked. I had 2 portions. I thought nothing of that evening. I went home, went to bed, went back to my life. About 3 weeks after that dinner, Patricia called me. She was not her normal self on the phone. She sounded shaken up. She told me she had something to tell me and that I needed to sit down. What she told me was this. A man named Raymond had been arrested. His full name was not even Raymond. That turned out to be a middle name he went by socially. The police had been investigating a missing persons case. A man who had disappeared a few months prior. He had last been seen in Raymond's neighborhood. During the investigation, they got a warrant to search Raymond's property. What they found in his home led to charges that included murder and evidence of cannibalism. I sat on the phone in complete silence for a long time after Patricia said that. She said the same thing I was thinking. She said she was not sure what had been served at that small dinner. She did not know if it was the same night. She did not know anything for certain, but neither of us could stop thinking about it. We eventually spoke to the investigators. We told them about the dinner. They noted it and said they would look into it as part of the broader case. They never confirmed to us directly what had been in the stew. Whether that was because they could not determine it or because they chose not to tell us, I do not know. I genuinely do not know. What I do know is that Raymond had done this before. It came out during the investigation and subsequent trial that this was not the first time. There had been at least 2 other victims. He had been operating this way for years. He was methodical about it. He was not some disorganized, unstable person. He was careful and he was social. He entertained people. He had friends who trusted him completely. The thing about Raymond that I keep thinking about is how normal he seemed. Not in a cliched way where I say he was the last person I would have suspected. That is too easy. What I mean is that he was genuinely pleasant to be around and showed no signs of anything being wrong. Ever. Not once in any interaction I had with him over those months did anything feel off. That is what unsettles me the most. Not the possibility of what I may have eaten, as horrible as that is, but the fact that someone can carry something that dark inside them and sit across a dinner table from you and smile and pour your wine and you will feel nothing. No instinct, no warning signal, nothing. Patricia and I both went to therapy after that. I think that was the right call. We have not spoken about it much in recent years, but we are still friends, and every now and then one of us will reference it without really referencing it and the other one understands. Raymond was convicted and is serving a life sentence. I no longer accept dinner invitations from people I do not know well. I am not proud of that because I think it is a fear response and not entirely rational, but that is just where I ended up with it. At the time this happened, I was 19. My cousin Marcus was 22 and the 2 guys with him, Derek and a guy everyone called Boots, were around the same age. Marcus had done a lot of camping in his life and was very comfortable in the outdoors. Derek and Boots were the same way. I was the least experienced person on the trip, but I had camped before and I was not nervous about it. We drove out to a state forest about 3 hours from where we lived. It was a big park with a campground and also a lot of backcountry access. The plan was to spend the first night at the main campground and then head into the backcountry for 2 nights and come back out. Pretty standard setup. The campground was mostly full when we got there, but not crazy busy. It was late in the season, a Thursday, so the crowd was lighter than it would be on a weekend. We got our site and set up. Then we walked around a bit to stretch our legs after the drive. The sites were numbered and spaced out reasonably well, not right on top of each other. That is when we first noticed the man at Site 7. Site 7 was not far from ours, and the man there was sitting in a camp chair facing the tree line, with his back more or less to the road. He did not have a tent up. He had a cooler, a small fire going, and a camp chair. That was it. No gear, no sleeping setup that we could see. He was big. Not tall necessarily, but broad, heavy-set. He had on dark, worn-looking clothes. He did not look at us when we walked past. We did not think much of it at first. Some people camp minimalist. Some people just like to sit by a fire. Whatever. But then later that evening, after it got dark, Marcus noticed that the man was still there. Same chair, same position. And now there was something on the fire. Like something cooking over it on a makeshift grate. The smell that came from it was strange. It was not a normal campfire food smell. It was heavier, almost sweet in a way that was not pleasant. Marcus said nothing at the time. Boots made a comment that it smelled weird. We all kind of shrugged it off. I woke up around 2 in the morning to use the bathroom. When I walked past Site 7, the man was still awake. He was crouched over the fire now, not sitting in the chair. And I could see more clearly that there was something on the grate. Something large. I could not tell what it was. I did not look long. I went to the bathroom and went back to the tent and told myself it was an animal he had hunted, which is a thing people do. I went back to sleep. We headed out into the backcountry the next morning and spent 2 nights out there without incident. It was a good trip. When we returned to the main campground to pack up and head home, we noticed that Site 7 was empty and had been cleared. The man was gone. The drive home was normal. We talked about the trip and got food on the way back. It was a good time overall. About 2 weeks after we got home, Marcus called me. He had seen a news article. A man matching the description of the person we had seen at Site 7 had been arrested in connection with the disappearance of 2 hikers who had gone missing in that same state forest over the previous year. During the search of his property, investigators found human remains in various states. He was a repeat offender. He had been using remote and semi-remote outdoor spaces for years. He had targeted solo hikers and campers. The case got significant local news coverage and eventually more. Marcus said he had already called the park and spoken to a ranger. He passed along what we had seen and the approximate dates. He told me that the ranger said law enforcement would likely want to speak with us, and they did. We gave statements. We described the man, the site, what we had seen cooking over the fire that night. The investigators thanked us and said our information was consistent with other witness accounts from that period. We never got a full debrief on what that was on the fire. I asked once and was told they could not share that with us at that stage of the investigation. I stopped asking after that because I was not sure I actually wanted to know. What stays with me about that night is the moment I walked past Site 7 at 2 in the morning. The way he was crouched over the fire. I walked past that slowly and I was close enough that he could have heard me. He did not look up. He did not move. He just stayed focused on whatever he was doing. And I walked on by like nothing was happening, went to the bathroom, and went back to sleep. I think about that a lot. How close we were to something terrible without knowing it. Marcus does not camp at public campgrounds anymore. He only goes to remote backcountry now where there are fewer people, which sounds counterintuitive, but I think his logic is that the type of person who preys on people tends to go where people are. I get that. I still camp occasionally, but I am more observant than I used to be. I notice people. I notice what sites look like, who is awake, what is on the fire. Most of the time it is nothing. But I notice. The man is serving multiple life sentences. The case is still, as far as I know, ongoing in terms of identifying all of his victims. And honestly, I am just glad that the 4 of us walked past Site 7 and kept going, and that none of us went over there alone.